We just heard a former Deputy Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security saying, just in the past hour, that there is much more we could be doing. This is Jane Lute saying this, but we're not doing it. How would you respond to that?
Well, I would respond to that by urging all of you to take a look back at the President's schedule of the last 4 or 5 months. And I think that will give you a very clear sense of how focused he has been on this particular issue. You'll recall that shortly after returning from the holidays, that the President rolled out specific cybersecurity legislation that we called on Congress to pass. The President mentioned the cybersecurity legislation in the State of the Union address and urged Congress to pass it. The thing I would point out is that since the President submitted those specific 3 pieces of legislation to Congress in January, and since he challenged them to pass it in his State of the Union address, we've seen very little action from Congress. And the fact of the matter is, what we need is not just improved efforts on the part of the federal government. We actually need to see improved coordination between the government and the private sector on these matters. And that effort to coordinate requires congressional action. And the fact is, we need the United States Congress to come out of the dark ages and actually join us here in the 21st century to make sure that we have the kinds of defenses that are necessary to protect a modern computer system. And we have not seen that kind of action in Congress. But the President has continued to act. The President, you'll recall, convened a cybersecurity summit at Stanford University in February. You'll recall that while he was at the Cyber Summit, the President signed an executive order that would streamline information sharing across the federal government to make sure that we were nimbly responding to threats that one particular agency may be seeing. You'll recall at the end of February that the President, again, took executive action to create the Cyber Threat Intelligence Integration Center. This essentially is an interagency working group that's modeled on the National Counterterrorism Center. And then, as I mentioned in response to Darlene's question, back in April, the President signed an executive order authorizing the Department of the Treasury to use financial sanctions to hold accountable those individuals who may have perpetrated a particular incident or may benefit from it. So the fact is, the President's been very focused on this and taken a number of steps to demonstrate how seriously he takes this issue, but we haven't seen Congress do a single thing. And the fact is, this is a very serious matter. It does pose a significant threat, not just to the American people, but also to our national security and to our economy. The President's done a lot of the hard work here. He and his team have actually written legislation. All we need Congress to do is take the vote to pass it. And hopefully, the news of this particular incident and the seriousness with which it's being treated, not just by the administration but by the news media, will prompt some rare congressional action.